How you doing?
Hey.
Found it very interesting what you the whole presentation.
Thank
I think it probably could be done even with those kids. They could benefit from learning all just the definitions, just those attitudes we have. Starting off there.
Yeah.
It's funny. I'm Irish, but when I went to Ireland, they made it clear you're an American. Even my close relatives, like I had my grandfather was there. I was looking at his papers when he came over in 1914 today. When he came over, yeah, we're considered Americans. I mean, even when we went over there, they were dirty Yanks, But I think what hit me with this whole thing is we haven't come very far. It's scary, and I think what this political landscape that we're on, I mean, it's like we don't talk directly of the racism and all those things, but it's all covered under. You see the changes with the laws, with everything from the books, the change in the laws, even down south. That they with going back to with the blacks, the minority. That they don't want they want to change the history. They don't want to even talk about the history. And I like I say, I grew up, and it's just I see this undercurrent of this. That's why I enjoy this church. It's inclusive, and I grew up in an area that there's this undercurrent, and I think that I hate to say that the last president really fed that. Fed the division, and it's scary, and it hasn't changed, and I still see that that I don't know. I'm not explaining it very well, but I just. Yeah, I just wanted. I enjoyed the whole
Thank
thing.
you. And as Irish people, you were the black people of Europe. And the Italians, y'all was the black people of Europe too at one point. Jewish people, y'all was the black people of Europe too. But then when it was advantageous to say, we're all white. Yeah, we're all white when it matters. Because there's always instances where it's like, well, you're not white. You're honorary white in this situation. You know what I'm saying? And to your point, that's why it's so important to have spaces like this, especially with children, because I see hope in our children. Children, some of the things that you may share with them, they are disgusted. Like, how could somebody do that as a human being? Like, they can't fathom certain things. It's like, I remember going to health class when I was in school, and if there were certain videos that they may have showed me about like sex or something like that, I probably would have been celibate for my entire life. You know what I'm saying? Just being exposed to certain things. And, a lot of our children, like the generation Z and Alpha generation, like these younger ones, they are far more advanced than we ever were. And just spending time with them, you see the hope and the possibility of them changing things. I'll put it this way. I grew up in a generation where I was kind of taught that there was a Wizard in Oz, but yet, I started to see certain things, especially through hip hop music that started where people were being exposed to the truth. And I started to see like, no, it ain't no Wizard in Oz. I could kind of see behind the curtain a little bit, right? These generations, they know there is no Wizard in Oz. You cannot lie to them. You cannot try to make them believe something that's not true. No. And if you're not genuine and direct with them and being honest and true, they will discard you and not trust anything that you have to say. And I'm thankful to see that type of generation because they are going to take things into a whole different level. And by investing time with our youth and just sitting around them, listening to them, they're not caught up in a lot of the things that we see that are going on. We just have to help prepare them to maintain the integrity and the kindness and the generosity that they have naturally, and to teach them how to navigate a landscape where they're going to come in contact with people who are not as kind, who are not as generous. So investing time around our younger people, that's a cure for a lot of the ills that we have. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, really? We're way over and nobody's left, so you really hit the spot. I wonder if you had studied the history of the U.S. Constitution to include bits of that. There is the Southern representatives took over, really, the Constitutional Convention. It's a brilliant document, but they did nothing to protect people of color and women, nothing in the original Constitution. And in fact, I have read a couple of books on the history of the Constitution. They included slavery 28 times in the U.S. Constitution without mentioning the word. Because the founders, even though they were Southerners, many of them, they knew that word would stir up the abolitionists, who were a strong, small group, and they would protest. They wanted to get that Constitution passed. But there are more instances in the Constitution than the 3/5 of a person nonsense that they tried to get in to get the Southerners some kind of equality, but it was only white Southern men, of course, that wanted that. But it might be a little leg that you can add to your talk, because from the beginning of the nation, there was this idea that people of color and women were not quite as good. So that's what we've been trying to overcome for centuries. The amendments that have been added to the Constitution started that, but of course our Supreme Court is taking us right back again. And we've got to be educated on what went on with the Constitution and what we can do to get our rights back, because they're being taken away again. So I can give you the names of a couple of books, librarian that I am, that
explains it.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
Beautiful. There we go. Beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
Loved it. I like what you were talking about, like the youth and the kind of the smaller attention span and reaching them. You kind of got to step in, step out. What about for the older generations? And I'm thinking more, I'm not going to throw one parent under the bus, but I have one parent who's very loose-lipped on his views, I guess shared it, on women, on race, on many different things. And I've tuned a deaf ear to him. But deep down inside, I'm saying, I don't think that's right. If I just completely shut down and don't say anything, I'm just letting that go. I have put up barriers to protect my kids from that sort of speech, because I don't think that's conducive in our household. But what advice would you have to kind of reach them or kind of open their eyes to seeing that maybe their view is really skewed and they really need to kind of open themselves up?
Wow. Yeah, ideas like that are kind of like cancer. You know, if you don't strive to address it as soon as possible, it just grows and spreads. And you have to figure out a way to just address it right on. And what comes out after the fact is something that you also have to be comfortable with accepting, because you're really in a position where you're in the same position that people have been in for generations, striving to make a decision in what is in the best interest of true equity, equality, fairness, all of those things. And you have to be courageous enough to just stand there and be like, no, that, and to challenge that. You have to be willing to challenge it. And that's what an upstander is. And that's why I called this presentation Modern Day Upstanders, because you have to be willing to stand up and address a lot of these things. Because if you allow it to live, it'll just sting somebody else. It's like a snake. And sometimes you got to cut the head of the snake off. And by starting doing it in the family, now it spreads and you've developed the confidence to be able to do it in the community and to demonstrate that, because your children is watching this too and how you handle it. And you're teaching them through your actions. And if you don't do nothing, that's what they're learning. That if they can see something like that, that they know is not right or uncomfortable, that they should do the same thing. So you're also standing up to show them how to do it. You know? So that's think about that as well. You're modeling what it means to be an upstander. And it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
We have a presidential election coming up. Any suggestions on how we should vote?
Oh my God. Oh my God. I don't know.
Seriously,
I don't know.
what would you have any suggestions on what people who are politically minded might want to do for this election?
In any election, I always tell people to make sure that you know who your local and regional officials are, because that is where you have most of your power and influence. I mean, these are people that you could run into at the grocery store, you know? In terms of the presidential, I don't even know. It's kind of like, I don't know. I have no idea. But I always encourage people, know who your local officials are, because they have a direct influence on your quality of life, where you actually live at. Yeah. Any other questions? Comments? All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Our closing video is Get Up, Stand Up by Bob Marley.